So on the call today, we've got a range of head teachers, aspiring heads. We're going to talk to you about what we think are the really exciting reforms to the National Professional Qualifications. We're going to talk about what's new, why we think they matter, and how you can find out if you're eligible for funding. We'll also tell you a bit about ambition, and you're going to meet some colleagues of mine here who will talk a bit more about the roles that they're playing. So a few introductions. First of all, I'm Tom Rees, the Executive Director of Programmes here at Ambition Institute. I was a primary head for 10 years and then an Education Director in a multi-academy trust before I joined Ambition. Really excited to be working on the reforms to professional development at the moment, and in particular today to talk about NPQs and headship. Got some colleagues here who I'll introduce quickly, and then they'll talk in a few minutes. To Mel Hooson, who's the Director of NPQs here at Ambition, former physics teacher, secondary head, and Director of a skit. So has held many different hats. Caroline Barlow, who's going to be joining us shortly, fantastic head teacher who many of you will be familiar with, and also a visiting fellow at Ambition. Really great to work with Caroline. She's been one of the facilitators on our NPQH in recent years, and we're looking forward to her working on the new ones with us as well. And then Katie Patton, who's just joined us. She's a dean in our learning design team. Again, former school leader and part of the ARC initial teacher training. I think that's right, isn't it, Katie? Where you were before you came and joined Ambition Institute, and now leading the design of our NPQ programs. So they're the people on the call who you're going to meet. I'd just like to say a few words about Ambition Institute for those of you who don't know us. So we're an educational charity who exists to help schools transform the life chances of disadvantaged young people. We aim to do that by helping teachers and school leaders to keep getting better through high quality and evidence-informed professional development. We think that the evidence points towards the quality of teaching being the most important factor within a school's control to improve outcomes for all children, but particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. We know how important it is to give everyone access to a great education, to a great school experience, and we know the role of schools and teachers in helping people to have more opportunity to do things like going to university, to securing a good job, and all those other adult outcomes like being able to own their own home and to be in good employment. We think that great teachers can help with this. It's not just a stab in the dark. Evidence tells us that professional development is likely to be the most effective tool we have to improve learning and outcomes for pupils. In fact, the impact of teachers on pupil outcomes has been estimated to be 3 times that of any other school-based factor. Going to have a look now a little bit at some of the evidence that we lean on and what it says about high quality professional development. So first of all, there's evidence that tells us that professional development for teachers is proven to support retention in the sector. And we know that that's a really important thing for us. A third of early career teachers leaving the profession within the first 5 years. And we know a trend that exists now with leaders, and in particular head teachers, to need to keep good people in the profession. So PD can really play an important part there. In particular, the impact of professional development on early career teachers is strong, so it can increase retention over the first 5 years of teachers' careers. Throughout a teacher's career, increased levels of professional development are associated with a reduced desire for teachers to move schools. And again, this is something that we think is really important, particularly when we see that improving the performance of serving teachers is 3 times more effective in raising standards than the combined efforts of all the attempts to improve teaching through replacement. So rather than sort of moving teachers around the system, I think it's a really a good bet to focus on professional development, helping all teachers to become incrementally better. We also know that the impact extends beyond teachers and onto children and their learning outcomes. So high quality professional development for teachers has a significant impact on people's learning outcomes. And we also know that it can help the teacher plateau. So most teachers stop improving after their first 5 to 10 years of their career. Effective professional development has been shown to help prevent that plateau, to enable teachers to continue improving beyond that first 5 to 10 years in post. So there's some of the reasons and some of the evidence why we think that focusing on professional development is a really good thing for us to be doing in the sector at the moment. And it leads me nicely to telling you a little bit about the new NPQ frameworks and what's changing and why. So, and thanks for telling us, honestly, your level of confidence coming into today's session. Felt like a lot of you have got at least some knowledge of what's going on. But I don't think anyone sort of professed to be the expert just yet. And that's fair enough, because there's lots changing quite quickly. So as you will know, the National Professional Qualifications are a national voluntary suite of qualifications. They're designed to support professional development of teachers and school leaders. The idea is that they equip teachers with the expertise to lead sustainable improvement in their schools. From this year, there is a brand new framework, and the overhaul of the NPQs is significant. So there are 3 new specialist qualifications that we've got here on the left-hand side: the NPQ for leading teacher, for leading behaviour and culture, for leading teacher development. And we think there's a really good focus here for professional development targeted at teachers who are in the classroom, perhaps without needing to go into a leadership pathway, continuing to develop their expertise in different areas. And the remaining 3 qualifications on the right-hand side are familiar. These existed in the previous framework, but they've had an overhaul, so they're being rewritten, redesigned quite a significant way. And we're going to talk particularly about those today, in particular about the NPQ for headship. So the last slide from me is to talk a little bit about some of the underpinning intentions that sit behind the reform. And there's lots, but I'm going to pick out 3 here. So the first one is a much greater attention to evidence. And this follows on really from a lot of work over the last 10 years in the profession, the introduction of the early career framework, for example, and other frameworks and documentation. The leadership and NPQ qualifications now much more clearly related to a common body of evidence, and the frameworks have been developed and approved by the Education Endowment Foundation, the EEF. Obviously, no evidence base is ever conclusive, but we think it's really positive that a lot of what we think works now is being captured and codified into professional qualifications. The second is a much closer focus on what teachers and school leaders need to know and be able to do to run a school well. And we think the frameworks take us a step forward in codifying a body of professional knowledge and practice, and that there's a much greater attention now being paid to the specific things that teachers and leaders need to know and be able to do in their roles. And we'll discuss this more shortly. And thirdly, this core body of knowledge and practice, which exists here within the NPQ frameworks, has been described as part of the golden thread that should run through every stage of a teacher's career. So from when people first start training to be a teacher, all the way through now to the qualifications for headship and for executive leadership, you can see a much greater coherence, what's been described as the golden thread of professional development. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Mel now, who's going to talk a bit about where the NPQs sit within the other frameworks as part of this golden thread.
Thanks, Tom, and afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much again for your time this afternoon. As Tom said, I'm going to take us through some of the detail of the NPQH programme, and hopefully you can leave today with a really good understanding of the brilliant content we'll be covering, the time commitment that you'll need to be making, and how you'll be assessed. If I'm missing anything as we go through, please do pop your questions into the Q&A box and we will come back to those and answer them at the end. Firstly, what you can see here is that the reformed NPQs are absolutely central to the professional development frameworks that span a teacher's career, going right the way through from initial teacher training to executive leadership and beyond. And I think what's interesting is that research suggests that teachers spend approximately 10 days a year engaged in professional development. So across the teaching workforce, that equates to more than 5 million days. And I know that during my time as a teacher and also as a head teacher, the training or the professional development I received could often feel a little bit ad hoc or disjointed, maybe even lacking in coherence. And it wasn't always clear to me, looking back, how my learning was being sequenced or how it was being mapped against my specific role. And so a key focus of these reforms, therefore, is that we're able to make professional development more effective and more coherent by building it on a core body of professional knowledge that remains throughout our career. And this means that it's easier to ensure that professional development connects to what's come before, and that it sets teachers and leaders up for the next stage of their professional learning. And that's what we're calling the golden thread. And you can see that the NPQs are a fundamental part of that. And it's something that we all think really hard about with regards to our students in terms of what do they need to know and be able to do, how will I sequence their learning, how will I retrieve that prior knowledge. And now we have absolutely the same care and attention being paid to how teachers and leaders learn, and rightly so. Hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of what the NPQs aim to achieve. So if we dig into these leadership qualifications, and particularly the NPQH in a little bit more detail, you'll notice firstly here that the qualifications remain the same, but any similarity really does end there. So these leadership NPQs are all 18 months long. So when you join us this November, the programme is going to take you right the way through to April 2023. They're obviously longer than the specialist qualifications that you will have heard about, and they cover more leadership areas because the work of senior leaders and head teachers is more complex, it's more multifaceted, and you'll require a really well-rounded view of school leadership beyond any current areas of responsibility you might now have, and also a really clear understanding of how different areas of school leadership interact. We've made sure that these qualifications also reflect your reality of leadership in a school context and provide really practical knowledge of how to lead and manage in a school setting, such as, for example, how to create the conditions for staff and pupils to thrive. And the new frameworks seek to map out what best practice means for schools in a move that takes these NPQs away from a more generic approach to leadership. And by that, I mean that leadership professional development has often in the past focused on personal traits, and that might mean the qualities of dynamics and charismatic leadership. But the reformed NPQs actually pay far less attention to that generic management and leadership style and pay more attention to the knowledge and skills that school leaders need to tackle and the persistent problems of their daily roles. So let's zoom in on the NPQH and the additional support offer that comes with it. First thing is then that you will be learning the crucial skills and the sector knowledge that you need. So there's a really, really strong evidence base that underpins the content of the framework and also of our programme. And as Tom said, these aren't stabs in the dark. We've thought really carefully about what it is in head teachers' knowledge, in their behaviours, in their decision making that makes the difference in their schools. You'll be driving habit change, and embedding new habits in ourselves and in others is really, really tricky. As adults, we don't change easily, and it's actually really difficult for us to begin to change our behaviours or how we make decisions. And the way that we've designed our programme will help you to apply what you've learned. You'll be connecting theory and practice to help those new habits to stick. So as you'll see in a moment, you'll be following a series of insight and application modules. And in the insight modules, we capture the very best that the sector has to contribute on a given topic. You'll really be getting under the hood of the research. And then in the application models, we will help you to use those ideas in your context with support from your peers. In terms of the flexibility there, we've thought really carefully about how we can design this programme to fit around your timetable. And most of this work can be completed at a time that suits you. So in a moment, I'll show you the timing of the various components and the programmes and how they lock into each other, but they've been broken down into really manageable chunks that will fit easily around your busy working week. And thriving in your school setting, you'll be developing the knowledge and the skills to work to the best of your ability and tackle the complexities and challenges of your daily role where you currently are. So if we can take a look at the eligibility and some of the funding here, you will be eligible to join us on this NPQH programme if you're in an English school. And in terms of funding, this programme and all the NPQs have been really, really generously funded. So it will be fully funded for you if you're in the first 2 years of headship in any schools. It will also be fully funded if you're in a PP30 school as an aspiring head. And by PP30, I mean in the top 30% of pupil premium schools. Now, that sounds a little bit complex, and it is. And I think the best bet is for you to get registered in our system, which I'll talk to you about in a moment, but get yourself registered, and then we can take care of the funding eligibility for you, and we will be back in touch with you about whether you're eligible for funding. So in terms of green flag roles, we're really looking at current head teachers, particularly new head teachers in the first 2 years of headship. You might be a head of school, you might be a deputy head or an assistant head teacher or vice principal, and you're really looking that the next step in your career would be into a head of school or a headship role. We wouldn't really be taking people onto the programme if they were a classroom teacher or a head of department. We're really looking for people who are a member of the senior leadership team, and their next move would be into headship. So if we take a look now at the additional support offer. We'll take a look first, my apologies, at the programme overview and give you a sense of how the different components hang together. So what you're looking at here is the full 18 months of the programme, and I will just give you a moment to absorb some of that information, and then I'll talk us through each of the components. Okay, so we kick off with a 2-week induction, and we're going to release that to you on the 18th of October. That'll give you a week of term time and a week of half term, hopefully, for you to choose when you engage with that induction. It's a couple of hours of asynchronous content that's on our online platform. We'll take you through programme orientation. You'll be able to see your programme journey mapped out. We will introduce you to the platform where much of your learning will take place. And then when we all return after half term in early November, we will kick off, as you can see, with a 6-hour conference there. And ordinarily that would be face-to-face, and we would love to get everybody face-to-face for that conference. However, ongoing concerns around COVID mean that that conference will be virtual. We'll be doing that online. And then you'll have another conference towards the summer months, which will be face-to-face then. Those dark blue blocks that you can see there, each of them is a 6-week course. So there are 9 6-week courses that span the 9 half terms of your 18-month programme. And in a moment, I will zoom into those blue blocks, but I'm going to come first to the assessment window at the end. Now, I think these reforms and what they say, what they bring with them around assessment is really, really key. So if you have been engaged in an NPQ ML or an NPQ SL previously, you'll be aware that there are big tasks or big projects that you have to implement and write up alongside attending your professional development sessions and alongside your day-to-day job. Now, we realise that that can be quite unwieldy. It adds to your already very heavy workload. And so we're delighted to say that those projects have been removed completely. And what it means is that at the end of your programme, and so we're looking now to May 2023, there will be an 8-day assessment window. And on day 1 of those 8 days, we will release to you a 2,000-word case study that will enable you to reflect on all the learning of those 9 6-week courses. And you will have 8 days then to respond to us with a 1,500-word response. The 3-month window reflects the time that we then have to mark and moderate your assessments and feed those results back to you. So I think when you're making a decision about whether or not to embark on an NPQH, that one's really key. You won't be having to implement big projects alongside your day-to-day work. There will just be one 8-day assessment window at the end of your programme. Let's zoom in then to one of those dark blue blocks and we'll see what a half term looks like. So this is what a 6-week course would look like. And again, I'll just give you a moment to absorb some of that information. We start then with these blue and yellow blocks that correspond to insight modules and application modules, and all of those are completed online. They are weekly modules, and you would need to be putting aside maybe 45 to 50 minutes a week to engage with these modules. So during an insight module, you would log on to our online platform called StepLab, There you'd be able to engage with the reading, with the videos, with some reflection questions that really get under the hood of the research and the evidence base and get to grips with the framework. That's done independently. And then on week 2, you would be logging in to complete your application module. Now, the way that we've designed this is you would log on with a buddy. So let's say Tom and I were buddies on the NPQH course. We would be logging on at the same time to take each other through the application module. And here we'd be able to reflect on what's come before in the insight module. We'd be asking each other probing questions around how did that insight module relate to your context? What did it make you think about around actions that you need to set for yourself this week? And build in a little bit of practice and a little bit of accountability with your buddy to ensure that we're taking that insight, we're applying it in a genuine way, and we're helping to build our habits. So those modules are all completed online at a time to suit you. You can complete them on your devices, you can complete them if you have any time in school, you can complete them at home, whatever suits you. Each half term then we have a 2-hour clinic, and those are facilitated and they will be online on the whole, and you will come together in smaller groups then of 15. So you'll be with 15 other people on your cohort, and this is an opportunity to really make sense of all the learning that you've taken from those insight and application modules. We'll be able to look at any common misconceptions and front load those. We'll be able to really support you in applying anything from your insight modules and make sure that it relates to your context in a really genuine way. And then the 1-hour communities are not facilitated, but they're the same as your clinic groups. And so you'll be spending another hour each half term with the same people, really learning to lean heavily on that network, understanding how different people are applying the same learning to different contexts and what that might mean for your learning. So in each half-term block, you would be making a commitment to 45 to 50 minutes a week online, and that's flexible as to when you do that, and then a commitment to coming to a 2-hour clinic each half-term. Okay, we will now take a look at the additional support offer, and this is something that the DFE has listened really carefully to the sector around, and some of the barriers that we know people can face when they're new to headship. And so alongside the NPQH, they have added in this additional support offer. Now, what this looks like is, if you chose to do this alongside your NPQH, is you would be allocated a coach, and you would be running through a cycle of coaching sessions and shadowing sessions over the course of a year. So let's say you started this in January with us. In that January spring term, you would have 1 coaching session and 1 shadowing session, and that would repeat throughout the year. This is really, really tailored to support your needs. There is some structure to it and some protocols, but we would be presenting you with a range of persistent problems that you're possibly facing in your role as a head teacher in your school, and you would be picking the one that's most relevant to you and getting some real-time one-to-one expert coaching from a serving school leader. If we can look at the next slide then. The eligibility around this is you are eligible for funding for this if you're in the first 2 years of headship. So no matter what school you're in, as long as it's a state school, you are absolutely entitled to funding for the additional support offer. So it's something, for example, if you're starting a headship role, if you started it this term, you could start your NPQH this November and then pick up the additional support offer in January, or pick it up in April at a time to support you and a time that will really add value to your journey through early headship. Okay, I think now we will pause there because Tom and I have given you an awful lot of information, and we will come to the Q&A box. So we'll just give you a few moments to tap away into the question and answer box, and we will begin to go through those.
Thanks, Mel. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Angeline, for posting the first question, which is that you're an assistant head who hasn't completed the NPQSL. Would you advise doing this qualification first? Well, I'll say what I think, and Mel can come in and correct me. I think a lot depends probably on what your next move is. And I think one of the things around the NPQH is a preparation for headship. So it's something to undertake if you're either new in role as a head teacher, or you are likely to be enroll within the next couple of years, because that's what the program's designed to do, is kind of gearing you up for headship. So I think we do have people that have been on assistant headship, assistant heads that have been on NPQHs before, and if they're close to that, close to headship, that seems to make more sense than if they're sort of an assistant head still quite a long way away. Mel, don't know if there's anything to add.
No, I would completely agree with that, Tom, but I am going to introduce Katie, because I'm sure she will have a view and will be able to add a little bit more detail around the design differences between SL and H.
Hi, yes, hello everybody, I'm Katie. So yeah, the programs are reasonably similar. I think what Tom says about how close you are to that move is a really important aspect of things. The key difference between SL and H is on H you get more clinics, so you get more time with those peers and chewing over and making sense of the content you've learned in those independent study modules. And you also have the school visit, which is not part of the SL program. So you kind of get a little bit more. The program's also at a higher price point, but you get a little bit more kind of in terms of inputs on the H program. In terms of program design, one of the things that we think is really important when we're designing is you learn something and then you have a think about it in terms of your context and think about how it applies, and then you have a go at like doing that in your setting, almost a little bit deliberate practice, but not quite, because this is a leadership program. But the idea that what you're learning is pertinent to your role. And so potentially the content and the pitch of the SL program is going to be more appropriate to you if you're working at SL, because it will feel more applicable to your role. But actually, if you looked at the frameworks, the evidence summaries in and of themselves, the actual content of the frameworks is reasonably similar. So you'd get, even if you did SL, you'd be getting access to a lot of the similar evidence base behind what makes effective school leadership. The application might be a bit more relevant and feel a bit more useful to your role. However, you get slightly fewer components. So hopefully that's a bit of information to help you make your decision. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Katie. And Mel, I'm conscious that we've got Caroline who's joined us. Shall I fire through a few more of these potentially quick answers, or do you want
to? We can do. I think, Tom, there are common themes there, particularly around funding and logistics and regional based questions. So we could come back to those logistical questions after we've spoken to Caroline.
Yeah, that sounds great. I think I'll just do a couple of quick ones to say that, yes, if you're in a trust, it works the same as if you're in a non-trust school. It's the same funding across. Regional and national, we're working as a national programme as Ambition. We've also got a lot of delivery that's taking place through regional delivery partners, particularly through the new Teaching School Hub infrastructure. We'll say a bit more about that, but I definitely don't want us to stop hearing from Caroline.
Thanks, Tom, and welcome, Caroline. So as we said previously, Caroline Barlow is joining us. She's a fantastic head teacher, but also facilitates and supports some of our leadership and headship programs here at Ambition Institute. So we thought it would be really useful for you to hear from somebody outside of Ambition Institute about their reflections on our programs and the impact that they have seen it had. So hello, Caroline, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Thank you. Thank you for slotting me in. Yeah, I mean, in terms of individual specific relevance, I think working through some of the questions that people are raising will be really valid and useful to people. The reflections that perhaps I can offer is that having facilitated some of the courses, there's probably some things that I would draw out that I hold probably reasonably distinct to Ambition and the way in which they construct things that I think are really worth thinking through when you're making choices about your provider and when you're thinking about the kind of course that you want to do. So they would be, for me, the fact that I don't think there are comparable courses out there with such a strong evidence base, and the application, as you've heard, of that evidence base to your lived reality and the ability to translate that evidence into practice that you're then reflecting on within a network is really strong and really powerful. And I've seen people both have that kind of Damascus moment where the light bulb goes on and actually suddenly it all makes sense. And then I've also seen that apply over a period of time where people have incrementally gained that sense of understanding. I think the other thing that I've particularly noticed is that and I don't know whether it's the kind of people that are drawn to the courses or the support that goes around it, but the real sense of support and open sharing within the groups has over the course of the last 2 or 3 years that I've been working with them is really strong, really strong, and actually people look out for each other. They talk to each other clearly offline. They have a real sense of looking after each other and looking out for each other. So those learning networks that you've got are not just academic and learning programs. They're actually also really strong, psychologically safe areas where people do talk about things that have gone horribly wrong. They talk about things they're really proud of. They encourage each other to be really proud of what they're doing. And it's just an incredibly positive space to be. As a facilitator, you wouldn't think that you would feel it as much, but I can facilitate a session after a really long day, and actually I'll come out of it full of energy because the buzz in the room is really strong and really tangible. So as a course to both participate in, learn from and be a part of, I think they're really positive, well designed and well constructed, that bring the best out of anyone that's on there. And the fact that it very clearly fits around your working commitments, that's been really carefully considered. It just encourages the application of knowledge, and bluntly, that's what we're after as a system, aren't we? Just that we develop as leaders, and then in turn, by doing that, we will develop the people around us as well. I could probably go on wittering for ages, Mel, but is that sufficient to start with?
That's really useful, and I think we were nervous, weren't we, when in March 2020 we shifted everything because we had to start delivering online, and there was a nervousness because we know the importance of those networks. We know how much people come to rely on them and how much it informs their practice. And actually, I think what we've learned over the last 18 months, Caroline, is that it hasn't impacted negatively on that, has it? People have still found a way. They've still been able to build those networks online and still actually get, make their own way and visit each other's schools physically. And so I would want to reiterate that around this, because we acknowledge that much of this learning takes place online. However, we have built in those opportunities around the clinics and around the communities where you'll still have that network.
Absolutely, I suppose, and as a facilitator and therefore a recipient of the organisation that goes behind this, I can reassure people that that the quality of organisation and support that goes into all aspects of the courses is really strong. As a facilitator, you do have to really prepare, really go through your stuff, know what you're talking about, be willing to come to the table kind of fully equipped to support the participants. So you're not just getting people who are kind of rocking up and reading off a screen. Actually, there's a real engagement and a really high quality level of, and a pride taken in that quality level of what people are receiving.
Brilliant. Thanks, Caroline. And one last thing, if I may. We're aware that these reformed NPQs may look and feel quite different to NPQs that have gone before. Is there anything that you would add to reassure potential participants around the evidence base, around what these NPQs are intending to do, and anything that you're looking forward to in terms of the impact that they will hopefully have across the sector?
I think just seeing what you've explained, I mean, I came in and got half of it, but seeing the thought process that goes behind that, there's clearly a kind of golden thread that runs throughout all of them, really strong evidence base. We keep reiterating that, but that what's being delivered has been well thought through, well constructed, and the way in which that is supported all the way through is really strong. So no, I'm quite excited to deliver these. I think that the changes from the old version, no critique to that. Every iteration has its time and place, but I think these represent a real evolution that's really exciting.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Caroline. I'm sure it's really useful for people to hear from somebody outside of Ambition who's had access to our resources and facilitated on them. Please continue to pop questions into the Q&A, including for Caroline, if you've got any for her there. We've got about 8 minutes left, so I'm just looking through these questions. And Katie, I can see you've flagged a couple.
Yeah, I was gonna. There's a couple of questions around flexibility. What happens if you miss a module? What happens if you're part-time? We've thought really hard about how to make this flexible. We know that teachers are super busy. There are busy times in schools. There are times when you're going to miss your weekly module. That's why a lot of the program is designed to be asynchronous, so you can fit it around your schedule. You can do it on your working days if you're part-time. we're trying to offer like choices of clinics, so that if you're part-time, you can most likely choose a clinic on your working day to try and make it flexible. And if you do occasionally miss a clinic or a conference, we've thought about what the catch-up package needs to be for those, and they will be sent out subsequently. And the reason why we've thought really hard about catch-up is if you do miss, so whilst we want to be really flexible, attendance is really important here, because you're building towards a summative assessment, which is testing your knowledge of the frameworks, and therefore we want to give you every chance possible to be successful in that assessment, and therefore we absolutely want you to turn up. We want you to be there. We want you to kind of attend, but we also understand that we have to have flexibility around what are really busy jobs and times in schools. And so yes, if you miss stuff, we'll have catch-up opportunities for you, and if you're part-time, there are ways in which to spread your learning out in a way that suits your working patterns and is flexible to you.
Great, thank you, Katie. Just looking at some of the open questions, there is a theme around funding here, so I'm going to answer this. So Elizabeth, thank you for bringing this up, because I think lots of people will be thinking the same. So Elizabeth has asked, is funding available for deputy heads who want to move on to headship and will probably move into headship within the duration of the programme? There is no straight answer here, sorry Elizabeth, but what we are in constant conversation with the Department for Education around this, around situations exactly like yours, that once you move into headship, you would then be eligible for funding. What I would advise is that you register with our system, which I'm going to tell you how to do in a moment, and get into our system. And once you're in our system, we can talk on your behalf around the funding eligibility and get back to you within the next 10 working days about answers on that funding. So it's absolutely not a definite no. So please just make sure that you're registered and we can have conversations on your behalf around that. James has asked around coaching. Can the new head coaching, so the additional support offer, be started at any point during the year, or can you only sign up at the beginning of the year? James, we've designed this to have 3 cohorts per year. We know that people move into headship either in September, January, April, and so that's when the cohorts for ASO will start. What I will say for the additional support offer, James, is that it's really, really flexible. So once you're enrolled onto the course, you will be assigned a coach, and then it's over to you and your coach to talk about when you would have your coaching session, when you would go and shadow your coach in their own school. And it might be that you need a coaching session right at the start of engaging with the additional support offer. It might be that it's more useful actually for you to put it off until after Easter. And so yes, you can apply for the NPQH and start that in November, and then in December apply for the ASO and begin that in January. So really flexible there. And then there's one, I work in Wales, I take it I'll be funding for myself, and the straight answer to that is unfortunately yes. In Wales you count as an international school, and so funding is not currently available for international schools. For the NPQH, the cost to that would be £1,985. I don't know if there's any questions within the answered questions, Tom or Katie or Caroline, that we feel we need to expand on.
Only that we had one around assessment, which is like a bit more information fees. That feels like it's just quite a different thing to previously. So yes, it is. As Mel talked about the structure of it, it's like an open book exam essentially, where you'll get given a 2,000 word case study, and you have about 1,500 words to respond to that case study, and it will refer to particular statements of the framework. So you have to demonstrate your knowledge and ability to apply the framework to practice. So in terms of that's quite different, it can feel quite high stakes, I think. Therefore we've attended to how we're going to prepare participants for that type of assessment as we go along. So we've built in lots of formative assessment into the programme, and in particular the clinics that run right from the start of the programme through to the end, like build the skills of that kind of case study analysis that you'll need at the end of the for the summative assessment. But then before the summative assessment as well, we're offering, one of your clinics will be based entirely on assessment, and there'll be 2 asynchronous support webinars as well available for you as well. So lots of yes, it's a very new thing, but we're putting lots of support in place for that very reason.
Thanks, Katie. And one's just popped up, last one, and then we'll wrap up. Is there a requirement to attend residential training as well online? There is no residential. What we've got is those 2 one-day conferences. So one will be coming up quite quickly in November, and one will then be next September at the start of the next academic year. Those are the only full days you'll be attending. Hopefully by next September, we'll be able to do it face-to-face. All of the others are shorter sessions, so those 2-hour clinics or 1-hour communities. Right, we have 2 minutes left, so if we can go on to the next slide and I will just wrap up. So just to finish on why Ambition, there are other lead providers that you could choose to follow an NPQH with, but hopefully we've shown you today that this is a really, really flexible programme, and Katie and her team have thought very carefully about what head teachers and deputy head teachers' working lives look like. We can't be coming out of school all of the time, and really chunking down that learning so that it's really flexible and will fit around your working week. In terms of our technology, as I said, we're using our platform called StepLab, and the beauty of StepLab and the uniqueness of StepLab is that it's been designed by teachers. There is nothing else out there that does what it does in terms of supporting you in applying your learning, applying those insights in a very genuine way to fit your context. I think in terms of our content design, this is our real unique selling point, and Katie and her team again have had really, really positive feedback from both the Department for Education and Education Endowment Foundation around the high quality of their design. And I think our mission is around, as Tom said at the start, we look to close the disadvantage gap that sadly still exists and is getting wider in all schools in England. And so we're very much focused on enabling all teachers and leaders to keep getting better so that we can support in closing that gap. And we have a really strong track record, as Caroline was talking about, a strong track record working through our delivery partners, but also on our central programmes. So if we take a look at the next steps, where do we go from here? So our application deadline for the NPQH is the 12th of October. So you still have a couple of weeks to get involved in this. Now, the best way to do that is to email applications@ambition.org.uk, and that will get you registered into our system. And from there, we will start having those funding conversations on your behalf and get back to you very quickly around if you're eligible for funding. So if you're unsure, if you're a deputy head and you're not sure about that, please email us and we will begin to investigate the funding on your behalf. So we will hang on this call. It's bang on 4:45, and we said we would let you go at 4:45. So please feel free to leave the call, but also the 4 of us will remain on if anybody has any extra questions. And thanks so much for your time this afternoon.